Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a spin through the biggest stories in MMA. I'm your host, Gorgeous George, and with me, as always, some of the best minds in the world of MMA. This week, we got Danny Segura, who has been kicking down doors in South Florida, producing great content. The multi-talented Matt Wells, who will be on the scene for us at PFL Week 1, 2022. He's out in the Big D. And, of course, Goes from MMA Junkie Radio, who just celebrated 15 years of doing the show. He's out in Sin City, one half of the dynamic duo. Cold Coffee is on the ones and twos. Let's get to it. Topic number one. Belal Muhammad defeated Vicente Luque this past Saturday at UFC on ESPN 34 to avenge a 2016 loss at UFC 205. Now he's undefeated in his last 8 contests, albeit there was one in his last 8 contests, albeit there is a no contest in there. And the active fighter is now in great standing within the deep welterweight division. Give me your thoughts on his win and what is shaping up to be next for him. 4 minutes are on the clock. Danny, you're leading off.
I thought it was a great victory. I thought Belal Muhammad, we didn't learn a lot about his skill set per se because it's always been there. We kind of know what he's good at. But I think now that he's become this top 5 contender, we really have seen sort of a maturity in his game, and that comes with fight IQ and just general managing of a fight. I think that's what did it. I don't think that he was perhaps levels beyond Luque and what Luque had to offer, but he just did a way better job at managing the fight and just maximizing his skill set within the context of the fight with Luque. So that right there speaks on maturity, and that's something that you see of a top 5 fighter. So clearly, Belal Muhammad is among the very best today at 170 pounds. And as far as what's next, I mean, it's a long line right now, and a lot of contenders trying to get that title shot. So it's a little bit tough for him. I think he's going to have to put in some work, even though he's already done a lot to get that title shot. So I think a fight with Gilbert Burns would make a lot of sense. I know Burns is coming off a loss and not even a championship loss, but in that fight against Khamzat Chimaev, I think we can all agree that his stock went through the roof. I think we clearly saw that Gilbert Burns is, still game in the division, still one of the very best. And to many people, Burns actually defeated Chimaev, depending on who you ask. It was certainly a close spot. So I think a fight with Gilbert Burns makes all the sense in the world, not only for Belal's perspective, because, he's looking for those big names, but also it makes sense for Gilbert Burns because, again, like he said, his stock's still up. There's no reason why he should go back to the line and kind of build his way back up fighting top 10 guys. I think this fight makes complete sense.
I love it. And yeah, the fact that Khamzat Chimaev and Gilbert Burns were talking about running it back, maybe that even moves Muhammad into a Colby Covington matchup. Matt Wells, share your thoughts.
Yeah, I was really impressed with Belal's performance. First off, I mean, the guy never stopped moving for 25 minutes. I mean, he executed a game plan to perfection and overcame what Vicente Luque was doing really well. He cut off the cage perfectly the entire fight, but he couldn't stop the takedowns. So Belal did a fantastic job, and it really puts himself in this position now where he can wait or he can stay busy. But if he stays busy, his options are kind of limited, considering he wants to fight the top names in the division. Danny mentioned Gilbert Burns. He's coming off a loss, and that was one of the things that Belal was talking about. Like, all these guys are coming off losses that the top contenders are fighting. But if you sit around and wait, I mean, you're going to have to fight one of these guys coming off of losses. The next guy up would, if it's not Gilbert Burns, would be Jorge Masvidal. He's still a name. He's still somebody that people like to watch, compete. So I could see that matchup coming to fruition if we do get the title fight planned and if Khamzat and Colby are matched up. So it all comes down to, what does Belal want to do? Does he want to wait, or does he actually want to stay active? And if he does, we could see, a Burns or a Masvidal matchup.
Yeah, and I like that you pointed out the cage. At the Apex, it's the 25-foot octagon. At the UFC 205, where they fought the first time, it's the 30-foot octagon. 33% more real estate. All right, Goes, share your thoughts on this topic.
I thought Belal looked amazing. I think he turned it up as of late. He's always been a good fighter, but now I think he's kind of transited into a great fighter. And don't forget, he had to do some adversity here. Through Ramadan, he had to prepare for all these things. So, Leon Edwards, I feel like is the guy. I know nothing's certain, but it feels like that's what's going to happen. So you're left with Colby Covington, Khamzat Chimaev, and now I feel like Belal Muhammad could maybe leapfrog. So what I think may happen is something that the UFC likes to do. They're going to give you the time, they're going to give you the money and the location, and the first guy that screws things up is out, and the two that are left, that's the fight. And if you look at Muhammad and what he's been able to do, he's been very active. I think he's an anytime, any place, anywhere guy. I think he could get that shot.
You just blew me away, because as great as it is to have deep divisions, that also increases the leverage for the UFC when it comes to negotiating time. Interesting. All right. Topic 2. This week was a little bizarre from the officiating standpoint in a few contests at UFC on ESPN 34. More specifically, I'm talking about Kyle Bohalyo and Ghazi Omar Gadziev. They were on the main card. And then, if you'll recall, Martin Budai versus Chris Barnett on the prelims. Both fights, coincidentally, were overseen by Dan Mergliotta, Dan the Tan. In both cases, we had the fighters that committed the fouls. They were up 2-0. I just want to give you guys some additional info here. In both cases, the ref said accidental when he was, deeming the extent of the foul, the injury, or whatever. In the prelim fight, no point was deducted, and the fighter was already carrying a serious rib injury. If you recall, Barnett was really hampered by those knees. Now, I want you guys to explain how, tell me about both of these technical decisions at UFC on ESPN 34. How were they handled? Did you agree with that? And what, if anything, would you change about the rule set to make things more clear when it comes to these illegal strikes? All right, 4 minutes are on the clock. Matt, you're leading off.
Man, it comes down to a simple question of how can you possibly do something illegal and still win the fight? Your illegal strikes led to the stoppage, and yet somehow you're still able to go to the scorecards and record a victory at the end of the day. It just doesn't make any sense. And if Dan Mergliotta followed the rules to the T, then we need to look at it and change the rules, because it does not make any sense. Guys can now kind of plan for this if they want to be shady, right? Not only can you go out there and throw an illegal strike to render your opponent, unable to compete, but you could also game the system the other way as well. Like if a leg kick, goes a little bit too inside, you can act like, hey, I can't continue after this groin shot if I'm up two rounds on the scorecards. So you guys can game the system both ways now that we've seen this happen twice in one card. I've never seen, technical decisions be read like this twice in one night. And it's just something that we need to really sit down and analyze. It just doesn't make any sense to me. It seems like if you throw the illegal strike and that leads to the stoppage of the fight, at the very least, it should be no contest, if not an outright disqualification. So we got to do something different here, man.
Yeah, and you know what, guys? Before I turn it over to Goes, I will say that in the main, if I have to give flexibility on the main card, Kyle had a moment where his head was kind of on Ghazi's back, and there was a moment where I think he could feel that the arm did come up, but just for a second. So unlike Sterling and Jan, where they were facing each other, and the ref had clearly set down opponent, because I know comparisons were made. And then in the prelims, boy, that one's tough, man. He's standing over him. He saw the real estate he had to work with Barnett's head, and he still delivered the strike. Lots to unpack here. Goes.
Well, look, I think it's an unfortunate situation, much like me having to wear this scarf this week, but props to Danny Segura. Fighters, fans, even refs, like they still can't really get a grasp on what exactly needs to happen. People aren't answering the way they do in the NBA, like quickly. Everything's still evolving. The sport's still young. But I feel like in these two situations, there should have been a DQ. I mean, I just feel like, remember, he said it's not that he didn't see the hand. He just thought that the game was being played, the fingertips. So he was aware of what he was doing. I just think he took a huge risk and it didn't pay off and he got caught. And as far as the elbows go, I mean, I felt like the one before, the one that actually caused problems, was kind of bad too. And if you look at the angle of where the fighter's at, where the referee's at, I do feel like some of these should have been called intentional. This is the toughest job on the planet as far as officiating goes. You have to do it real time. These things are going to happen. But I think this is something that we can somewhat control. I just don't really like going to the scorecards, guys. I really like to have a definite answer. I feel like a DQ was in order in both instances.
Yeah, and also I may add that in the prelim fight, Dan told the fighter it's going to go to the scorecards before him and the doctor made that final decision. I rewatched these babies, man. Danny Segura, finish off.
There's tons of issues. First of all, in the Caio Borralho fight, he got taken 1 point, and then the strike was deemed unintentional, so it went to a technical decision. But then, why would you get a point taken away then? It just makes no sense. It's a complete mess. And I think this whole situation, which oddly enough, we had 2 in 1 card, and then in Bellator we had one before, and that was an actual accidental issue where there was a clash of heads between Corey Anderson and Vadim Nemkov. That's accidental. But this was actually a strike, a technique implemented. Did it come with malice? Probably not. I don't think a fighter went in there to do an illegal strike. But nonetheless, it was ignorant, it was careless, whatever you want to call it. And I think this points out a huge loophole in the system, how Matt Wells pointed out. I think fighters can start taking advantage of it, and hopefully it doesn't come down to that. But I think the rules needs to be rechecked, because clearly something is not working here.
Good stuff, fellas. All right, we have to move on here. Let's go to topic 3. Bellator 277 took place this past Friday, and Patricio Freire defeated AJ McKee in the main event to reclaim the undisputed featherweight title. It was a unanimous decision according to the judges, and I want to know, what's the bigger deal? Freire reclaiming the title for the 3rd time, and let's not forget, he's also got a 4th title at lightweight at some point. Some are calling him the greatest Bellator fighter ever. Or McKee suffering that first loss, man, that shiny 0 in the L column, it's gone. And you know how AJ, man, I mean, he was strutting that, and that may have helped him going forward, you know, when he became a full free agent. Guys, do we need a trilogy? What are your thoughts here? Goes, get the party started.
I think eventually we will get a trilogy. For me, I feel like what Pitbull did, he deserves tons of praise, tons of accomplishments. But we have to remember what it was like going into this fight. And the talk going into this fight, half of it was on the matchup, but half of it was on AJ McKee's status in the world, right? Not just in Bellator, in the world. Because Alexander Volkanovski just had the performance of a lifetime. Now we're talking about AJ McKee and what he could possibly do, right? That was a lot of what dominated the headlines. So for AJ McKee to come up short here, now that puts a lot of questions out in the air, right? Free agency. Did his stock drop a little bit here? We saw the UFC play really hardball with Kayla Harrison. Would they do something similar to AJ McKee? I think maybe that might be the case. There's a lot of these different things, where a rematch could happen at 155, 145. So many questions come out from the McKee side that I feel like that was just the bigger headline. And I do think they will fight a 3rd time.
Yeah, good point, man. With Kayla, I mean, I thought for sure she was headed towards the UFC, but they didn't have as much interest. So maybe because the division isn't as deep, I don't know. Danny, share your thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway for me was, I mean, it was certainly a good fight. It was certainly a competitive one. But I think for me was we had this crazy expectations of AJ McKee after he destroyed Pitbull in that fight. And obviously, like, rightfully so. I mean, to put away Pitbull in that manner is super, super impressive. But at the same time, that can happen. We've seen people get caught. We've seen these things happen. And now I think we got a better picture of what a matchup between AJ McKee and Pitbull actually looks like. So in my opinion, I think those huge expectations that we had of AJ McKee kind of got brought down back to earth a little bit more. I do think that, back then when the conversation started, which was who is the best featherweight on the planet? Is it Volkanovski? Is it AJ McKee? He's undefeated. He's looking great. I think we have the answer now, and that is Volkanovski. That's not to say that AJ McKee can go on and become a greater fighter and evolve. Obviously, he's still very young. He has all the tools and resources to do that. But I think the expectations got brought down a little bit, and I think he took a bit of a hit in his stock. So all in all, I think it was a great fight. I don't know if a trilogy is expected. They're 1-1, obviously, but it seems that McKee is pretty adamant that he's just going to stick to 155. He did look noticeably bigger than Patricio. So yeah, if he moves to 155, look, I think Patricio has no business at 155. He's very small, even for 145. So I wouldn't mind that the score just stays 1-1, to be quite honest. So we'll see, but it depends on what AJ McKee decides to do. I think that'll dictate whether we need a trilogy or not.
All right, and Matt, let's finish it off. Trilogy, no? What'd you think of the fight? Yeah, so it's on you.
Yeah, I think we can get to a trilogy, but I think we have some steps to get there first. Since AJ says he wants to move up to 155, I would like to see him, go up to 155 and fight Patricio. You know what? Challenge the brother. Well, let's get this family feud thing rolling. And if he can go out there and get the win over him, then of course Patricio can come back up to 155. Is one of the things that Patricio talked about in his post-fight press conference. He said he only went to 55 to fight Chandler, so it was a fight that really made sense for him. Well, what fight would make more sense than going up to avenge your brother's loss and become a double champion again? So I think that's how we can get to the trilogy. Since AJ seems completely out on, cutting down 145 ever again, I don't blame him. I hate weight cutting. It just doesn't make any sense, especially when everybody's doing it to achieve the same thing. So, you know what? Fight at your more natural weight. And I think that's how we get to that trilogy. Go up to 155, fight Patricio, beat him, and then Patricio will come up and challenge you.
Yep, and throw me in that group. I hate weight cutting too. That's why I look like a calzone with legs, but I'm proud of it. All right, topic 4. Continuing with Bellator, the Bellator Light Heavyweight Grand Prix ended in a no contest by 3 seconds, guys. 3 seconds. After the dust settled, Nemkov went home as the undisputed light heavyweight champion that he was when he entered. But the Grand Prix has no resolution. The Grand Prix belt and the $1 million prize has yet to be awarded. It will be awarded on a later date. So give me your thoughts on the ending sequence, and does this in any way sour you guys on tournaments? Danny, lead things off.
Not at all. I'm still about the tournaments. I think that this could have happened in any bout. This wasn't a inconsequence of the format of the tournament or anything like that. It could have literally happened in any fight. So to me, it's not a big deal that it happened. Like, it sucks, but whatever. You just reschedule it and you run it back, and we still get a final. We still get the confetti. We still get the belt. We still get the Grand Prix final. I mean, it just gets postponed. But yeah, it was unfortunate just to see it end that way, especially for Corey Anderson. 3 seconds. He was just 3 seconds away from winning $1 million on top of his purse, becoming Bellator champion and Grand Prix champion. So it was a huge moment for his career. So it sucks for him, but at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of positives that he can take away from this performance. And I think he said that himself at the post-fight press conference. Look, I do think he's the better fighter. And just from watching that performance, I do think that he's got Nemkov's number. Nemkov, I mean, he's going to have to do big changes to sort of address that wrestling part. And even the striking, I think Corey Anderson was having a lot of success there. So I think overall, just Corey Anderson probably has his number, is going to enter the rematch per se with a lot more confidence. And I do think just watching the performance, we can spark up a conversation of, is the best light heavyweight in the world over at Bellator? Maybe, because Corey Anderson looked pretty damn good, and he has a win over the current UFC champion. So interesting stuff overall.
Yeah, for sure, man. Just like Volkanovski, McKee, I wanted to see how interesting it would get with having a clear-cut winner here at Bellator and then matching him up to the guys over at the UFC. All right, Matt, what are your thoughts on this topic?
You know, I still like the idea of tournaments, and I still like the production that we get out of them in terms of like producing a star and, seeing these runs that these guys go on. I think that if this was a standalone title fight, you have Corey Anderson and Nemkov fight each other and this same result occurs, I think everybody's still calling for the immediate run back. So, whether we got here with their tournament or not, I think everybody still wants to see this one ran back. It just sucks that, Corey Anderson gets snubbed out of $1 million check because of a true accidental headbutt. We were talking about, illegal fouls earlier. This one, they clashed heads and both of them tapped their head and looked up at the ref. There's a fantastic shot that the photographer got of that moment. So truly an accidental thing that leads to an unfortunate ending to this fight. But like Danny said, Corey Anderson was looking fantastic. He showed a lot of improvements in the stand-up game. And of course, as we all knew going in, if he could get the fight to the ground, it would be his world. And that's what we saw. So it just sucks for him that it ended that way, because Corey Anderson was looking fantastic, well on his way to becoming the winner of that tournament and becoming champion.
Corey Anderson was also looking forward to a vacation, going hunting, and now he's got to put that off. All right, goes, finish off.
I mean, tournaments are always going to have these flaws, guys. It's always happened like this. But considering how many Scott Coker's actually done, things have gone relatively well. I think people are just piling on because of what happened with the bantamweight tournament as well. But these things are always going to happen, and this is what makes mixed martial arts fun, to be a little different. So I love the Grand Prix. Now, I'm kind of happy it was ruled a no contest. I want them to do it over again. More than a year was put into all this, so you feel like we have to have some kind of finality to it without any controversy. There's $1 million on the line, and like Matt said, we might be talking about who the greatest light heavyweight in the world is. So we need to have an ending that just marks all that, the confetti that comes down, all that stuff. I feel Corey Anderson, I would react the same way. You got to remember, for about 3-4 minutes, he thought he won $1 million and it got taken away. I think we would all kind of act that way too. And it sucks that they're in this giant long camp. They're just going to have to do it more. And I think it's going to be even sweeter when it's all said and done. But when it's done, we'll know who deserves that belt.
Yeah, and I also want to say Corey Anderson handled it with grace. I mean, he was initially PO'd, but then he shook hands and said, "Hey, we just got to run it back." So I want to give him credit for that, because he was short of just a milli. 3 seconds, guys. 3 seconds. Holy cow. All right, finishing things off, Michael Bisping and Jake Paul spent a lot of last week beefing with each other on the social media. It makes you believe like they're maybe trying to set up a fight, obviously, or maybe just chirping, because both guys chirp. Let's be honest. All of it is documented on MMA Junkie, but I wanted to give you guys a little bit of a taste. Check out what Jake Paul was saying. He says, if you can get licensed with your one eye, I'd love to fight you. And of course, Bisping, who is never one to shy away from, these types of verbal sparring, he just said, send location. I love it, but I want to know what your guys' thoughts are. I ask you, would you be at all interested or intrigued by this possible matchup? We're going to start off with Matt. You know the deal. We got 4 minutes.
I could not be any less interested. And it's not because I don't like the idea of seeing, Michael Bisping going out there and shutting up Jake Paul or anything like that. But I was starting to get on board with what Jake Paul was doing in terms of his elevation in his boxing career. Going out there, fighting the YouTuber, fighting the NBA player, then fighting a real fighter in Ben Askren, and then fighting a former UFC champion in Tyron Woodley, who was active. And now you're calling out still a UFC champion, but a retired one who hasn't been fighting. I want to see Jake Paul call out somebody who's active, because you had me believing that you were out there, trying to fight, real active fighters now. Michael Bisping is enjoying his life as a commentator, enjoying his time with his family, doing movies and stuff like that. So let him continue doing that. I have no doubts that Michael Bisping wouldn't go out there and spark Jake Paul, but I would rather see Jake Paul fight somebody who's, more relevant to today's game, who's active. The trash talk is funny, though. I mean, yeah. I'm on board with that. But everything else, no. Jake Paul, let me see you fight somebody active, please.
All right. Wow. Strong opinions there coming from Matt Wells. How about you, Goes? What are your thoughts?
I love all of this. Okay. I love everything about it except for the actual fight. I'm not interested in the fight. I'm interested in the smack talk. I'm interested in the back and forth. I think Jake Paul has been a genius up to this point, picking the right guys. He likes to attach himself to former champions, and this would make sense in his world. The back and forth would be great, but the actual fight proves nothing, like most of these fights, right? Like Matt said, Michael Bisping's been retired for a minute now. And, he's got a comfortable career. There's a reason why he retired, and Jake Paul brings up that reason. And I actually think that's not a good look for him. If you're going to make fun of a fighter and say he's got one eye, well, then I think we all flip it on you and go, why are you calling out a guy with one eye? Like, that just doesn't make sense, right? So I think the actual fight just doesn't really bring much interest in. When you're Jake Paul, you're not stuck to divisions and only UFC fighters. Like, he can call out anybody he wants. Pick somebody better than this. It's not going to be interesting. I'm going to have to veto this one.
All right. A veto from Goes. The only thing I can think of is maybe because he just knows these guys are tied to contracts, the ones that are younger and active. So what's the point of going there? And I guess he's going after popular retired fighters. But you're right, both of you. Hey man, come on. Like, let's pick somebody more your size or more your youth, I guess. Danny Segura, finish things off here.
That's my reaction to this whole thing. I am fed up with this whole Jake Paul thing. And I don't know if it's because it's Monday and maybe I'm feeling some type of way, but guys, I think Matt Wells explained it perfectly. Look, I think as long as we saw some progression in the competition that Jake Paul was facing, okay, then we're working towards something. But it seems like he's kind of staying in this realm of calling 40-year-old or retired UFC fighters that don't compete in boxing, that don't have a history of competitions in the boxing world. And I don't like that. Like, you signed up for this. You You said you were going to fight the best. You want to escalate. You want to respect the sport. Well, start progressing. Start calling on other names. What about the Tyson Fury one? Okay, that interests me. But a fight with Michael Bisping does not interest me at all. In the smack talk, I mean, he's just doing this every week. Last week was Oscar De La Hoya. The week before that was somebody else. Now this week is Michael Bisping. The following week will be somebody else, and it just gets repetitive and boring, in my opinion. So I'm not fully about it. So we'll see what stems from this. I think my feelings might change if there's actually a contract, if they actually get something signed, because then it's like, okay, well, this is for a purpose. But if it's just for retweets, just for clicks, just for headlines, just for clout, as the kids say, I'm kind of done with it. Either fight or don't fight, Jake Paul, but do something.
There you go. Good stuff from the team as always. Goals goes, hold up that scarf. Come on, we got to take our proper medicine. People don't know what that says. Atletico de Madrid. They did defeat our Manchester United. So here we are paying off a bet. And fight. The fights still continue this week. Like I mentioned, Matt Wells is going to be covering PFL 1 out in Arlington, Texas. One championship. They're reloaded this weekend. Bellator 278. Nolan and Matt out there in Hawaii. And of course, another 205. Excuse me, another fight night card. And that'll be handled by Cold Coffee. So keep it locked on MMA Junkie throughout the week. And don't forget to catch us here next week on the Spinning Back Clique.